Okay, and then I'm going to record it on my. Okay, right, we're off and running.
Awesome.
So hopefully they will both work, or one of them will work. So let's dive straight in, shall we? Uh,
Okay.
your body will show you the way. Would you describe this, Ellen, as an energetic self-help book?
Well, I don't really resonate very much with the term self-help because I think of self-help books as kind of rules that other people give you in how to help yourself. And that may be a prejudice on my part. It is, though, about how to tune into what your body, mind, and spirit are communicating with each other using the language of energy. So it is focused on self-healing, but it's also focused on healing the planet. And I think it is a little different from a self-help book because it doesn't give a program for how to make changes. It really talks about, well, what is this built-in guidance system? We have this built-in guidance system in our body, and we're made of energy, and our body, mind, and spirit communicate using energy all the time. So how can we tap into that constant communication and creation of self that's happening and work with it more effectively to create not only the life we want for ourselves, but the life we want for the collective, for the planet?
That's interesting. So where did the idea come from to write this book? What led you to it?
Well, I am a conscious channel, among other things. I was trained by my inner teachers for many years. I've been in training with them for, at least 50 years now. And so some of what I choose to do creatively is a collaboration with them and the teaching they've been giving me. I'm also an energy medicine practitioner and a medical intuitive. And so my work in the last 40 years has been to help people work with their own energies and their own healing. And I wrote a book 2 years ago called The Language Your Body Speaks that detailed that I really believe that the body speaks energy, and it's not a metaphor. It really is how this all works. And so what I wanted to do now is in this book was take that concept further and say, well, where do we get the guidance? Where do we get the information we need in order to make not just better choices, but a better creation of self in this life? I know that sounds kind of grandiose, but that was my impulse. Is we're dealing with a lot of change, and I don't know anyone out there who hasn't experienced some kind of change, either personally or collectively. And it's not enough to just cope with change. I think we're in the middle of a really big sea change. It's more than just the more details and overwhelm. It's that we're really transforming as a species, as a planet, and I really believe we need to go inward to get that inner guidance system activated. We have the equipment, but we haven't been using it. And so I think this is about how do we activate that equipment for ourselves and use it every day in an easy and natural way.
So is this book really about learning the language of our energy system?
Yeah, and it's about well, it follows on the book I wrote called The Language Your Body Speaks. And so this time around, you can read this book as a beginner. You don't have to know anything about the language of energy to read it, but it will speak to you if you're also very advanced, you've worked with energy systems for years and years, because I'm not teaching about um, energy systems. I'm teaching about how energy communicates and how we can tap into that. And just as a brief overview, the language of energy is very multidimensional. It includes sound and imagery and touch and feeling and smell and all our sensations and direct knowing and ability to perceive a shift in a field of activity. Lots of things that we use all the time to navigate in life, but we tend to tune them out and go right up into the brain box and try to kind of run everything from our cognitive or our thinking brain. So it's about reactivating our full intelligence, and it's a full body intelligence.
So how can somebody who reads the book find their inner voice? That how do they navigate to find that inner intelligence?
Well, that's what the book's all about. Every page of the book shows different ways to do that, and it is following a kind of intuitive pattern rather than a systematic. First do this, then do this, then do this, because I believe that we all have different gifts and different abilities. So for some people, they will tap into how they hear things and what to do with their ability to have hearing and inner hearing. For other people, it's visualization and visioning. For other people, it's looking at, when I know something, what do I do with that knowledge? How do I explore a thought or knowing that comes to me? So the book is easy to read. I wrote it to be very readable. You don't have to learn all the exercises and things that are in there, but it's chock full of activities you can do. I call them play with it, where you can try things on for size. And, just a very simple one, even in the introduction that I offer, and it goes way, way beyond that, is just when you're asking yourself a question and you don't know, kind of, you're all confused in your mind, just put your hands out in front of you, kind of like a balance scale, and put two of the choices, one in each hand, and see which hand feels heavier to you. Let your body amplify that knowing. And it's just a simple tool. And I go beyond that because I really don't encourage us to stay with binary thinking, that either or thinking. But it's a good example of the kind of thing you can do to amplify what you know beyond your thinking brain.
When I read that, the description you've just given about the balance, I thought it was really good and very simple, but it reminded me of dowsing a little bit. And I wondered if you'd kind of got that from any dowsing experiences that you had with using your body as a pendulum.
Well, I do teach in the book an energy test called the pendulum test that's out there that I learned from Donna Eden, who I studied with sort of later in my career. And but I didn't get it from that. I got it from my inner teachers early on when I was having trouble making decisions. And they said, well, you're having trouble making decisions because you're not listening to what you want and what you know. So put it into your body and let your body amplify that. So it was an early lesson I got from my teachers, but I didn't invent it. Dowsers use it. Lots of folks use that kind of amplification of yes, no. And what I want to say to listeners out there is, some of you have encountered energy testing, muscle testing, a pendulum, lots of different tools that give you yes, no. I think that's a terrible vocabulary. We would not go, climb a mountain to visit the wise guru in the cave, only to ask him, well, I'm going to ask you some questions and you can answer yes or no. I mean, that's not the best way to get wisdom. It's a good way to get immediate biofeedback from the body, because the body is very wired for binaries. But in my book, what I'm talking about is, how can you evolve your body past the binary into a more both and spherical awareness? So I talk about it as binary thinking versus spherical consciousness. And so a tool that only gives you two vocabulary words of yes, no isn't a very good one.
So there's a lot of reference to subtle energy, and I think energy work is quite subtle. And you talk about in the book about going into the meridians in the body, and I found that really interesting, how somebody could perhaps do that who only had maybe a little awareness of meridians rather than a full on in Chinese medicine training for that. Is that a fair assessment? Is that what somebody could use your book to do?
Excuse me. Absolutely. And in fact, sometimes if you're a beginner, you have better luck with some of this stuff because your trained brain isn't interrupting with all the information you think you know about meridians. And for those of you out there who've studied a lot about meridians, it's a beautiful, rich system. Yet, often we learn it, we memorize details, and we say, okay, this is this and this is that, and we haven't made those correlations for ourselves. When you get to know the energies directly through direct encounter, you may characterize them quite differently. And this is something I was taught by an inner teacher I talked about in the book that I called The Old Chinese Gentleman, who came from an era in China before the Chinese acupuncture system had been fully fleshed out. And he taught me to enter the stream, which is drop into the energy to get to know it. And again, that's an inside out way of getting to know the energy. And not only do I think there's 18 guided visits to various energy streams in the book, but I've provided MP3 recordings of them that people can download and shut your eyes and just get guided into a little visit into the stream. And the visits don't tell you what to see, but they say, hey, look over here, what do you notice, and check this out, or try this energy medicine activity while you're here in the stream, and see how that feels or how that influences your awareness. So yes, I think anybody can get to know those energies much deeper. And I see them not just as wiring in the body. I mean, often you see the picture of the meridians and it looks like wiring, right? But they're cosmic streams that come from other places into us, through us, and out of us back into cosmic connection. Just like a regular stream has a source and it pours out into the ocean eventually and connects up with all the waters of the earth, these streams that feed our organs, that help us run the body, have a really strong cosmic component. So I do talk in each case about how to tap into that cosmic component, as well as work with some of the everyday benefits of using this energy in your body. So it's kind of like if you cook, you want to know what your different herbs can do to flavor your soup. And I like to teach the streams as kind of different flavors of our being, different ways we understand these energies that co-create our physical being.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm just looking at it through the book. You start off with reference to the chakra system, and as the sort of 7 main chakras. It struck me that that's a relatively easy one of the energy streams to kind of connect to. It's not too complicated, whereas obviously other systems are very, very complicated and multi-layered.
Right.
Is that a good
Right.
example of how someone can use the book, who's a beginner maybe, to get into this kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, as a beginner, I don't think you even need to know about energy systems, although I introduce some of them in the context of activities. You can just look at your everyday life experience, and I give ways to do that in these sections I call play with it. For example, I'll come back to your question about chakras, but one that I give a lot earlier in the book is to imagine you have a sniffer dog, like at the airport. And you know how the sniffer dogs look for contraband in your bags. Sometimes we need to know where a situation comes from, because a headache isn't just a headache, or a stomach ache comes from some other part of our being, not only in our body, but sometimes in our energy field or even in our life. And so what happens is you get yourself a little sniffer dog or sniffer animal and send it off and say, hey, Bowser, find me where this is coming from. Where does this situation come from? And you let the dog show you where in your body or where in your life or field you need to bring your attention. That's something that you don't have to know anything about any energy system or any tradition to try out, unless you've never been to an airport and seen a sniffer dog, so you don't know what I mean. But most people can figure that out from the description. And I've got tons of those kinds of everyday things you can do. So when you get to something like the chakras, which are centers that bring energy in and out of our body, they're about our exchange with the world, but they're also storage systems. I mean, it's where we store a lot of our experience. So I have an exercise called fishing in the chakras, where you basically want to get more insight into one of your some issue you're exploring, body, mind, or spirit. It doesn't have to just be a health issue. And you go to each of the chakras and you throw in a fishing line, and you see what comes up. What gets caught on your hook when you do that? And so it's a much more playful way to work with these as real places within our being, rather than treating them as this learned system that I know how to clear a chakra because I circle this way and then I circle that way. And I don't mean to sound sarcastic. I love all those methods too. I'm trained in Eden energy medicine, which has some beautiful methods for working with each system. But too often we don't internalize what we've learned because we don't own them as part of our being. We've learned them as this thing someone else told us we had. And if you can't feel your chakras or experience them through direct interaction, they remain these abstracts that someone else tells us about. And so I teach people, feel them. Can you feel anything moving and swirling? Play with your hand and see what you feel there. And if you don't feel anything, tune into your imagination. What do you see there? And if you don't see anything, tune into your taste. Do you taste something there? Again, activating your ability to perceive energies so that we're not just going with learned details. Because most of us, I don't know about you, my brain is chock full of stuff that I've read in books and I've learned and other people's ways of systematizing reality. And it doesn't connect me up to my truth. In fact, sometimes it imposes a reality that isn't there. And I can't perceive what's true for me in this moment in this body because I'm caught up in other people's definitions.
Well, that does open up a little side question. I had another question in mind, but as you've mentioned the word truth, and you are talking about an energy healing system that has a wider implication than just personal healing.
Yes.
What's your take on truth? Because there's a slogan out there which says we're living in a post-truth world, referencing media. Well, I think anyone can understand the media was never intended necessarily to tell you the truth about something. It was always going to be an opinion on something. So it was written by another human being. Do you feel that truth only really exists within us as individuals, within our hearts?
Well, I mean, that's an excellent question. And I have an entire chapter in the book on outside in thinking versus inside out. This notion that we need to shift from understanding truth is what other people think, what other people tell us, even the studies other people do, many of which are quite flawed, but they still say this is the truth because we've proved it. And we need to be able to activate our soul's truth, whatever that is. And it doesn't mean that it's more true than what other people experience. But if I don't know what's right for me and what's true for me coming from deep within, then I'm at the mercy of whatever flim-flam person can convince me they're more true, their truth is more truthy than the next person's truth. And that's what our era is about right now. It's competing truths because we're being bombarded by so much unfiltered information. I mean, the internet doesn't have editors anymore, like publications had. And even that was flawed. And it is part of this movement towards global spherical consciousness, where I know because I can tune into the part of my nature that is part of the collective. And, we're like bees and dolphins and other animals and trees even that have swarm consciousness or collective consciousness. And as individuals, I think that how we save ourselves and the planet is we connect into our ability to hear and perceive what's for the good of humanity. From my perspective, and with global consciousness, because it's a both and consciousness where what's true for me is very contextual to where I sit and what I'm living, and it might be a very different truth for what you live over there. And, you know, anthropologists have known this for quite some time, that everything that we think is fixed and definite, like even definitions of male and female, that differs from culture to culture. And so everything we think is truth and fact is relative to its context and its purpose. So I think that we do need to get inside and know what our purpose and our truth is and our deepest values, so that we can operate out of those and not be swayed by the wind of other people's hot air, you know, including me as an author. I don't want you to read my book and say, now I know the truth. I want you to read my book and say, now I've got a good idea of how I can get closer to my truth, how I can really connect in and hear my truth on a more regular basis. And if I accomplish that with this book, I think, whoa, that's a great accomplishment. You don't have to remember any of my exercises if what you take away is, I'm listening to myself better now, and I'm hearing my soul's truth in amongst those inner voices that guide me.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I'm sort of thinking, finding that inner compass, that inner truth that you talk about in the book is obviously really useful and beneficial to us. And I do like the way your book actually has what you call, let's play, and it's encouraging people to do their own work and do their own experiments and finding out things. And I'm sure that, sometimes the things that are blocking that you can't make work perhaps are telling us more than the things that do work. But I love the fact that it's experiential, and I think that's actually really really special.
Well, thank you. I think it has to be. I think it has to be. I mean, one of the things that at the root of that is that our culture tends to think we're all generic, that they can do a study of 100,000 people and tell us what the truth is because of the majority, because there's some belief underlying it that we're all the same, that we're all generic. And we're not. I mean, I don't perceive us that way. If I look at a crowd of people, I see different strands of spirit coming into each of us, and they have different flavors. So the energies that feed you aren't identical to the energies that feed me, and they aren't identical to the energies that feed someone else. And the instrument that you create to play the music of your soul needs to be a different instrument than the instrument I create to play the music of my soul. And that's true of each reader. So I think that we need to get past this kind of culture-wide notion that truth is generic, that reality is generic, that the body is generic, and understand that the diversity that we're made of is spectacular. You know, it's like all the colors of the rainbow and then some, and start to claim what our energies need in terms of an instrument to play the music of our own soul. You know, and the orchestra has all kinds of instruments in it, and the piccolo can't do what a cello can do, but in its own context, the piccolo is an amazing instrument. The cello can't do what a piccolo can do. And I think that, that we do pressure each other to be some kind of generic norm, even though nobody can quite say what that is. I mean, you have to be skinny and beautiful and tall, and, that's what I've kind of taken from the norm. We need to get past that. It's just so negating of what this human expression is. I mean, you look around a crowd, everybody's different.
And if you start... Did some of the inspiration for writing this book come from your experience as an energy healer when, you ask somebody, well, why have you come to see me? What's troubling you? What's the problem? And they give you a kind of a psychological interpretation of pain or an issue or conditioning, and they don't have the tools to feel into what is actually underneath the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been part of what influenced me. Another part is that we get these diagnoses. They come in and they say, I've got cancer. And I'm thinking, okay, that's like the last name Smith. There's so many different kinds of cancer. What is it you have? And they've already objectified it to a thing out there, and they've looked it up on the internet. So they're like trying to make their experience conform to what they've read. And of course, the name cancer carries so much baggage. So they've taken on some of that baggage. Oh my God, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. Instead of being able to tune into what is happening in here And what is this thing that maybe my doctor called cancer, but I can call boundary issues because my cells are replicating too fast, and how can I look at that? So what I try to teach people is how to get to the energetics of whatever situation it is, rather than the external definitions. And I do that in a lot of different ways, including asking it for a different name. Ask your so-called illness, your situation, what do you want me to call you? How, what's your name today? And then dialoguing with that, unpacking the meaning of the name for you, dialoguing with, Horace or Myrtle or Myron or, whoever shows up, to let them teach you what you need to know, why they're signaling with imbalance, and where you can go to find balance. And so along with that externalization of our experience, we've also internalized a question that we ask over and over in our culture, and I think it's the wrong question. We ask, what's wrong and how can I fix it? Over and over, especially with healing. And we go to the doctor, what's wrong? Let's figure out what's wrong, and then I'll tell you how to fix it, how to heal it. And if we just shift to better questions, what's needed here? Who's needing to be heard? How can I support you today? Where are my strengths right in this moment? If we ask better questions, we get better information. And I learned that the hard way by asking over and over for years and years, what's wrong? How can I fix it? And getting so much information about my wrongness that the fabric of the rightness that could have supported the healing was getting degraded by the process of trying to heal. And yes, I've worked with at least 10,000 clients over the years, channeling and or healing. And most of them don't know how to go in and listen and hear and encounter, to connect into their own being. And I've come to kind of believe that the root of illness is disconnection, that the root of not feeling right, whether it's emotional, social, spiritual, etc., is that we're not connected. And if you think of a car, I push in the clutch to disconnect the gears. And when I'm disconnected, I can't go forward. I can't make the car move. I have to engage the gear. I have to get in gear to move. And that getting in gear is about connecting in to the instrument so it can actually heal. Because your body knows how to heal, but boy, do we put a lot of obstacles in the way of doing that, because healing is about moving towards wholeness and wellness. And if we're always asking what's wrong, and what's causing me to be defective, we're not moving towards wholeness or wellness. We're moving towards a really wonderful understanding of defects and wrongness, which maybe makes us interesting, to other people who have that same question, but doesn't heal what's ailing us.
Okay, I think that's a great place to kind of leave it there. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's one thing that we missed. So when I edit the podcast, I'd like to put something back in, and that's actually, I think it needs to go near the beginning. So if I could just ask you one question, and it's going to be chopped and it's going to be moved. And I really liked the way you explained the energy system, and how it's different from the chemistry of our bodies. And I just wondered if you'd mind just sort of giving us in your words, how you see this difference between what energy medicine is and what chemistry and conventional medicine is.
Certainly. Well, our body kind of speaks in two languages, and it speaks in chemistry and it speaks in energy, in subtle energy. And we all know the chemistry from Western medicine, because most of our medicine is chemically based. We test the blood for chemical balance, and then we take a chemical pill, and we totally believe that white pill is going to heal us. When we switch to the other language, which is how the body communicates, your brain sends out signals, your spine sends out signals. Throughout the body, there's electromagnetics and other energetic signaling. We lose our belief that you can shift the energy to make a difference. But you can, because it is not only the other language that the body speaks in order to do its business, but it underlies the chemistry, that when you shift the energy, you can shift your chemistry. But when you shift the chemistry, you don't necessarily influence the energies. And so energy medicine is any practice that allows you to participate in this energetic communication of the body, which includes yoga and acupressure and acupuncture and Tai Chi and Qigong and all those other traditional ones, and then this more contemporary form of energy medicine that I'm teaching in the book. But it's all about, if it's chemistry, I can't participate. I'm not trained as a chemist. But if it's energy, I can participate because energy is a language and I speak fluent English. And in fact, I've learned some other languages. So I can participate in the creation of sentences and, you know, the learning of vocabulary and the building blocks of grammar. I can participate in energy because it's the first language I learned. As infants, we all know the language of energy, and we're trained to go into verbal language instead, and we lose track of the language of energy. So in this book, I'm reteaching what people knew as they were infants, as in our early days on the planet.
Do you believe it was an ancient form of healing that was lost and then has been rediscovered perhaps in recent years? Because it does rather beg the question, how have we survived for around 250,000 years on Earth if there was no medicine?
Yeah, I think that it's always been here, and it's been suppressed by cultures that chose to validate chemical over energy healing. But Aboriginal cultures have used it, shamanic cultures have used it. All the traditions of spirituality use some form of energy medicine. I mean, yoga has been with us in various forms. So I don't think it was lost. I think it has been encapsulated at different times in different traditions, and then suppressed by the outside in rationalist cultures, more than, you know, if I travel in certain parts of the world, I've worked a lot internationally, and some places, you know, I say what I do for a living, that I'm a channel and that I'm an energy healer, and they go, oh yeah, my grandma does that. Oh yeah, you know, all the women of our village do that. You know, it isn't lost. It wasn't suppressed as much as it was maybe oppressed. And so those of us who grew up in a very Western cultural context may have lost track of it. But there are lots of traditions that we can hook into that can remind us. And my job, and what I've been asked to do by my inner teachers, is find a contemporary form for it, not to just try to resuscitate traditional forms of healing, but find a way to explain it and teach it that people can identify with in their everyday life. So they don't have to think it's this arcane thing that comes from India, although those are beautiful traditions, or this weirdo practice that only, you know, Tibetans practice. Well, no, I mean, it's been seen in every culture, including Western American culture, but it's been suppressed. So it is about our reclaiming our birthright, I think, and our mother tongue.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. And just want to remind everybody listening, the book is called Your Body Will Show You the Way by Ellen Meredith. And I imagine it's available at all good bookstores and no doubt on your website. And I'll put that in the show notes for this episode.
Great.
Thank you very much, Ellen, for your time and your wonderful explanation. It's very
Oh,
helpful.
thank you, Simon, and thank you for the work you're doing in the world.